Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey folks, this is episode 112 of The Team House. We have Bob Adolph in studio. He was originally on the show way back on episode 37. I hope you guys will go and check that out for a little bit of information about his book. He wrote a memoir called Surviving the United Nations. Bob was a Special Forces officer, and then he was a chief of security for the United Nations in a number of different countries. I mean, in Iraq, Yemen. You spent time in Sierra Leone, Indonesia.
Yes.
Your adventures have taken you really all over the world, and we're really happy to have you here in person. The last episode, we kept you up and gave your wife a hard time as well, I'm sure, because you were up at like 3 a.m. in Italy, zooming into this call.
I remember.
So
I remember. 3 o'clock in the morning, my wife was asleep, and she...
What's wrong with these guys?
Yes, what's wrong with these guys? She knows what's wrong with me. She wasn't sure about you.
We thank Bob's wife, and we're glad that you're here today in person. I think all of you know, I'm Jack Murphy. This is my co-host, Dave Park. We got D here producing tonight. And Bob, welcome to the show, man. Welcome to the studio. We're really happy to have you here.
Thanks, Jack. It's a pleasure to be here, an actual person.
Yeah.
As opposed to working virtually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bob and I went out before the show. I had a couple old fashions just to let you know that I'm properly
lubed.
I'm right.
Yes.
I've gotten right before
Grey
the show.
Goose vodka. I'm properly lubricated.
Well, Bob had a Miller High Life before the show, but now we're getting into the good stuff here.
Yeah.
Dave, what are you drinking there?
A little bit of Lefroy. Yeah. You're a vodka drinker, not so much a Scotch drinker.
I'm not sure I have. During the summertime, I'll drink gin tonics.
Yeah.
Okay. And during the winter, martinis. Okay, so that seems to be where I've settled out. I'm 69 years old. I'll be 70, obviously, next year. And I seem to have settled on vodka.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Does your taste sort of change as you age, as you get older?
Absolutely. But I was too stupid to notice when I was young.
Well, what was your drink when you were young? What were some of those progressions?
No. It started out with Chivas Regal. And I drank Chivas Regal for one reason. We had a sergeant on our Special Forces team that drank Chivas Regal. He was a sergeant first class, and he was handsome. He was articulate. He was recently returned from Vietnam, and he drank Chivas Regal Scotch. And I was none of those things. So I wanted at least a little bit of that. So I started drinking Chivas Regal Scotch because he did. My hero.
It's good advertisement. I mean, it's like that Suntory time from Bill Murray on. Suntory time. Yeah. No, Chivas Regal.
It was good.
I haven't had that in a long time.
We had a former FSB operative on the show a few episodes back, and we got to hear all about the cognac.
Oh, yeah. He's a big cognac guy.
Yeah. He said vodka is actually not the thing in the FSB, it's cognac.
Yeah.
Well, I've got some cognac stories. When we were in the Belgian Commando School in 1973, we had a composite team put together from 10 Special Forces group, went to the Belgian Commando School, and they served French rations. And in every one of the French rations was a small bottle of cognac. So,
Hell yeah.
obviously, I traded up.
Yeah.
You want my foie gras?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take the...
A little different than Ranger School.
I was just thinking that would have made Ranger
I
School
never got
bearable, right?
any cognac in Ranger School. I must have missed it.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, man. I'd really like to hear about some of these stories about your... because in the last interview, we really talked a lot about your time in the United Nations. I'd like to hear a little bit about your time in Special Forces.
Yeah, let's start from the beginning. Let's hear your origin story. Like, where did you come from and what led you to the Army in the first place?
Okay. Let's start out by saying that I'm the oldest of 9 children in a very poor family, okay? Very, very blue collar. We were blue collar. Most of the folks I knew never bothered to finish high school, okay? I mean, I was destined to become a construction laborer. My uncle worked in the Pile Drivers Union in Boston, Massachusetts, and he got me a job as a construction laborer in the union, which was making $7 an hour back in the early 1970s after I graduated high school. And I thought I was lucky. I graduated 313 out of 330 in my high school graduating class. The only people that graduated lower than me had serious cognitive issues. Okay? But I hated school. I absolutely hated school. So, unfortunately, the Vietnam War had not yet wound down, and the draft was still active. And I ended up with a really low draft number. So I went down, looked at my local recruiter's office, and he introduced me to the U.S. Army Special Forces. There was a poster, and the poster was of this Special Forces guy, young, handsome, strong, virile, camouflage makeup, okay, green beret. I think, if memory serves, there was a rope around his chest, okay, you might have seen this old advertisement, okay, carrying a rifle. And I just said, oh my God, I want to be that.
Right.
So I talked to the recruiting sergeant, and he said, well, we have to take all these tests. Now, up until this point in my life, I was convinced, because everyone told me, that I was not particularly gifted in any sense this way.
Uh-huh.
So I took the test. I didn't expect to do very well, but I had hoped to do well enough to qualify for Special Forces, because desperately, that's what I wanted to do. And the sergeant came out and said, you can have anything you want. I said, what do you mean? He said, your scores are excellent. They're excellent. In fact, I have a directive from the Secretary of the Army that says that anyone with your scores will be offered, entering the Army at this point, will be offered a seat in West Point.
Wow.
I turned it down. Why did I turn it down? I could not imagine
Going back to
myself.
school.
I couldn't. It was beyond my capacity. Okay,
Yeah.
I could imagine myself perhaps become a sergeant in Special Forces. I could. My mind could encompass that.
Right.
But the idea of going to West Point, and I hated school. Okay, it was more than I could. Okay, so I signed up for Special Forces and never looked back. It was the single best decision of my life. It set the stage for everything that followed. It introduced me to mature, experienced individuals who were more senior to me when I got to 10 Special Forces Group that I wanted to emulate.
Uh-huh.
I was very, very impressed with the organization. I was very, very impressed with their mission, and I was inordinately impressed with the individuals that I was serving with. I so much wanted to be like them. Of course, I wasn't, but I very much wanted to be like them. If it meant drinking Chivas Regal Scotch, even though I hated Chivas Regal Scotch, that's exactly what I was going to do when I was a young sergeant, because the senior sergeants were all drinking Chivas Regal, the cool guys, and I desperately wanted to be one of the cool guys.
How was that for you, joining a team? And a lot of these guys had probably been to Vietnam and back
Yes.
several
Yes.
times, and
Yes.
here you are, and you went straight in from the street.
Yes.
So, what was that like for you?
I felt horribly inadequate. I had volunteered to go to Vietnam when I was still in training group, but unfortunately, 5th Special Forces Group closed up shop, came home in April, if memory serves, in April of 1973 while I was still in training group. And so there was no opportunity for me to get to Vietnam and prove myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the Army, in its wisdom, at that time my family lived in Massachusetts, sent me to 10th Special Forces Group, a 45-minute drive from my hometown in Massachusetts. I left Massachusetts to see the world,
Right.
and was returned to Massachusetts. My mother looked at me and she says, Bobby, I thought we got rid of you. Sorry, Mom. But it was the best possible assignment for me, because I learned so much. I needed those 3 years on a team in 10th Special Forces Group to kind of learn the ropes.
Right.
And those guys who had fought in Vietnam looked on me not too unkindly, and on occasion took me under the wing and told me things that I otherwise would never have known. The other thing was, now we're talking about a peacetime army. So it was not about fighting, it was about training, it was about schools. So I volunteered for everything I could get. Absolutely everything I could get, I volunteered. So I volunteered for Belgian Commando School, I volunteered for Danish Combat Swimmer School, I volunteered to go to NCOES. I hated school, but my sergeant major told me, you need to get your ass to NCOES. And I said, oh God, Fort Benning. But I went, I did it. And then, after 2.5 years on the same team and serving with some officers, some fine officers, I said to myself, I might be able to do what these guys are doing. I was on the road to making early staff sergeant, and did. But I thought I might be able to make another step. And it took, I was scared to death, but I took the step, and I talked to my sergeant major about going to officer candidate school. My company commander at that time was Harley Davis, later Major General Harley Davis. And he was my company commander. He said, yeah, but you're going to have to get some college first. So the sergeant major made sure that I was free and clear to navigate, and made sure that I was available at 6 o'clock in the evening, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, to attend Wachusett Community College at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. And I went to school at night, every night, Monday through Thursday. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I did my homework and papers and stuff like that. And of course, Special Forces actually counted something. All the military courses that I had taken, or many of them, counted for some college credit. And I actually was able to achieve an associate's degree in a relatively short period of time. I applied for officer candidate school, and while my application for OCS was in, I made staff sergeant, and then I got orders immediately to become a drill sergeant at Fort Dix, New Jersey. You ever been to Fort Dix?
No.
I don't advise it. The only set of orders that will cancel out drill sergeant orders for an enlisted man is orders to go to OCS. I got the orders to go to OCS. And
How was it when you were there? Could they pull you for recruiter or drill sergeant school, or had that changed?
Like in Ranger Battalion or
No,
or
at SF. Because you got pulled, right? They gave you orders.
Not for that. They would pull you for SWIC.
Okay.
That's what SF guys would get pulled for.
yeah, you could get pulled for SWIC. But they desperately needed qualified drill sergeants. I was infantry. I was light weapons.
Right.
Okay, so from their perspective, and I was an early selectee for staff sergeant. I made staff sergeant in 4 years. You can't make it any faster than that. And that had nothing to do with me. Okay, don't look at me and say, oh, gee, Bob was smart. No, Bob wasn't smart, okay? It was the post-Vietnam era, okay? And when you look at the kind of training that we got, vice what the standard infantry staff sergeants or sergeants were getting, squad leaders and team leaders, no. I just had all the advantages. I had all the advantages, and that was given.
Well, before moving on, I would like to hear about the Belgian Commando School and the Danish Scout Swimmer School.
Yeah, the Belgian Commando School is terrific. Well, we put together a composite team at 10 Special Forces Group. We went to Belgium. It was in the early fall of 1973, as a matter of fact. We just recently arrived. I got there in the summer of 73. And it was a young, strong, composite team, because we knew we were going to get screwed with by the Belgians. And we had to do something. So we get there, and we're by this time. Oh, I should mention this. They had taken promotion authority away from the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center in school. So when I graduated, my class graduated. I graduated as a PFC.
Wow.
I graduated as a PFC. So when I reported in the 10th Special Forces Group, I was still a private first class with a full flash. Okay, my sergeant major took one look at me. He says, "Get that rank insignia off, Sergeant Major. Get it off." I took it off. He handed me Spec 4 pins. He said, "Put these on." I said, "But Sergeant Major, I'm not a specialist for it." He says, do it now." "Yes, Sergeant Major." Okay, so I became a Spec 4. 5 months after that, I was a Sergeant E5. Okay, not for any reason other than the fact that the Sergeant Major was offended by the fact that anybody was walking around with a full flash green beret that was a PFC. No, this cannot be. So we went to Belgium, and it was fun. It was interesting. They had this place called Marche-les-Dames. It was on the Meuse River in Belgium, and there's this enormous rock face that we had to climb, and it was in a castle. Literally, the headquarters of the Belgian training commando school was in a castle, and it was fascinating. It was something I'd never seen anything like this before. And we lived in tents at the foot of the castle. One of the memorable requirements was a 45-minute obstacle course, which was you do it a full run, and you have to do hand over water. There was an acrophobia course that was all done above 30 feet. So literally, if you have problems with heights, you'll have a problem with this course. Okay, there was a trapeze. There was one of those balance beams, 30 foot high. Okay, it scared the hell out of just about everybody. And there was a zip line, but the guy was supposed to be down at the bottom with the brake. He's supposed to have the brake on the zip line, and you climb this tree, maybe up 50 feet or so. Okay, so you get up to the top, grab the T-bar, and ride it down. Okay, and you're assuming that the guy down at the bottom is going to brake you in time so you don't hit the tree. It didn't always work out that way. I hit the damn tree, and it was a bloody mess.
You're so pretty, though. I mean,
Yes, I know. My wife tells me all the time how pretty I am. But yeah, no, it was pretty messed up. So there was the aquaphobia course. There was a mini seer exercise, capture, escape, evasion. We got some bad French rations along with the cognac. There was some bad fragua, all right, and we had to medically evacuate two of our team.
Wow.
Yeah, had to medically evacuate them. They were leaking from both ends. Okay, bad French rations. Okay, don't recommend it. Okay, I was smart to stick with the cognac. Okay, I recommend the cognac. Stay away from the fragua.
And you, at the Belgian Commando school, you guys also jump out of the hot air balloon, right?
Yeah, and that was. It wasn't a hot air balloon. I think it was actually a
Like a
helium
Zeppelin?
balloon. It was a helium balloon. It was over at Schaffen in Belgium, and of course everybody wants the sexy, jump wings. So we went over to Schaffen, and we spent all day over there. And jumping out of a balloon, if you've never jumped out of a balloon, it's a different kind of thing altogether. When you're in a C-130 or a C-17 or a C-47 or a Black Hawk, whatever jump you're making, usually there's a lot of noise, a lot of excitement, a lot of pumped up adrenaline. The French jump master invites 5 guys into the basket. Okay, they've got a long cable, goes up about 1,000 feet. Okay, you're using old French parachutes. Okay, round circulars. Okay.
World War II vintage.
Yeah. That's what it felt like anyway. And then the French jump master, instead of get ready, there's none of that. Okay, there's none of that. You're already hooked up.
Are there like
on the ground?
violins
No, there's
and
nothing.
Everybody gets a flute of champagne
There's
on their
nothing.
way off.
There's nothing. Okay, you go up 1,000 feet. You're looking at the view. It's real pretty. Okay, then there's a little crossbar. The Belgian jump master takes the crossbar, puts it aside, and then invites the first jumper. I just happen to be the first jumper to leave.
Mon ami.
So I step up and I look over my toes and I go, holy shit, that's a long way down. None of the excitement is there. There's no tap out. There's nothing, okay? You just have to find the wherewithal within yourself
Right.
to step off.
Right.
Okay? It took me a while. It took me a while, but I did finally step off. And then the opening shock is a long, long way away. You're not going 130 knots this way.
Right,
Okay?
right.
So you're just falling. Okay? It takes a while to get to. So you hear every one of the bands break on the back. Snap, 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 snap. And you're going in for the reserve because, damn, shouldn't this thing have opened by now? Okay? It should have opened by now. Oh, son of a. And then, poof, it opens.
And the French parachutes were better than their foie gras, I hope.
Yeah. Well, they all worked. I'm still here, so
Yeah.
yes. Okay. Yeah. So Scoffin was interesting. Jumping out of a balloon, that was Interesting. I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it. Not many of us have had the opportunity to jump out of a balloon. It was
pretty
something
cool.
different. It was pretty cool. And then we graduate Belgian Commando school, and they get this neat little badge with an upright dagger, based on the British system. Okay, so they actually, as I understand it, the British trained the early Belgian commandos, and they used some of their iconic, some of their icons.
It makes sense that some of it would come out of the SOE. Or...
Yep. So anyway, it was a great experience. I broke the nose of the karate instructor. They had a karate instructor, and I had studied some martial arts in my youth. And as we were doing some of the early workouts, the instructor recognized that I had some training. So he decided to use me as a practice dummy, which is wonderful. Okay, it's wonderful to be tossed around, kicked in the ribs, okay, slapped. I recommend it to everybody. So one time we faced off, and we got into our fighting stances, and he rushed me. And I just reacted instinctively, and I threw my hand up like this, and I broke his nose. Now, this guy is the Belgian national karate coach. He's like 6'4". I'm 5'9". He's like 250. I'm like, at that time, 140 pounds at my best. He set his own nose, okay, and then said, "Encore, s'il vous plaît." I said, "Oh, shit, he's going to kill me. He's going to kill me." And, of course, he did. We faced off again, and then he did something I'd never seen before. He spit in my face. But in that split second where he spit in my face, and I was going like, what the hell? Suddenly I'm on my back. And he's picked me up, tossed me, put me on my back, has me in a chokehold. He's just demonstrated to everybody there that the fact that I broke his nose was a total, complete, and utter fluke.
Right.
And he wanted to make sure everybody knew it.
Right.
I paid for that broken nose.
So, what was? How did you guys end up in the Danish Scout Swimmer School? Because I heard like horror stories about it from the Dead A guys who would get sent there. They almost felt like it was a punishment.
Actually, my father was in the Navy, and I learned diving at the age of 16. And I was trained as a diver by a World War II UDT guy, a frogman, a real frogman. And he was my trainer. And I thought the Special Forces Combat Divers course was pretty tough. More than half as tough as this old UDT guy. Okay, he put me through some serious shit. At the age of 16, and he enjoyed it. He enjoyed it way too much.
Right.
Okay? These kind of guys should not be loose on trainees, okay? And particularly not 16-year-old trainees. But I learned. So I ended up on a scout swim team, so it made sense that I would end up going to Danish Combat Swimmer School. And again, it was a composite team. So we put the youngest and the strongest guys, and the guys some of the guys that went were, how can I say this? It was an interesting group. There was a mixed group. So there were some that had Vietnam experience, some that didn't. Okay, but we were all in the same boat. And when we get there, I remember one of the runs, the Commander Volke was the commander of the Frogman Corps, the Danish Frogman Corps, and he says he's going to take us out for a little run today, cross country, okay, just a little stroll through the park.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, 10 Ks, and I swear to God, every one of the instructors at the Danish Combat Swimmer School represents Denmark at the Olympics, okay, in running. They all are like tall, blonde, blue-eyed, and they've got nothing but lungs and legs, okay? I run like an elephant runs, or a rhinoceros. I got flat feet, I go, okay? These guys were just gazelles. They glide, and this is cross-country running, okay? This ain't running flats, this is cross-country running. And it's a tourist attraction, too. They take us to visit the graves of Danish kings. You know, the old Vikings.
Well,
this is King Gustav over here. Look, King Gustav. Okay, and then off we go again. After 10 Ks, all of us are wrung out, and then the Danes rip off all their clothes, and jump into the fjord. And of course, we're like,
What?
okay. Well, they're taking their clothes off. Everybody's going skinny dipping, so off we go. We
When in
jump into-
Copenhagen.
Yeah, we jumped in the fjord. Commander Falke was an interesting guy. He one of the things he always insisted on, everybody had to stay together, stay together, stay together. So we'd go out, and there was like a buoy that was like 5 miles out at sea in the fjord, and he'd dump, and it was like a stormy weather. It was sea state. It was bad, but they dumped us in the water and said, "Okay, swim toward shore, stay together." And every day we quit at 5 o'clock. Every day we quit at 5 o'clock. That was the rule. Okay, so it got to be 5 o'clock. We're only halfway to shore, and we're all going like, they're going to pull us out of the water. They're going to take us in. We're done. No. Falke picks us up, okay, puts us back in the boat, takes us out to the buoy, and says, "This time, stay together." The graduation swim was 10K, and it was about 5 hours.
Yeah.
5 hours in the
That's a
water.
crazy long swim.
In dry suits with the limp French fins. So unlike
This is like Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah,
era.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is not. It's not quite where it is today, right?
Well, it wasn't like the stiff fins, okay, that we used in the American grouping. So the stiffer the fin, the greater the push you get, okay. But of course, it's hard on your legs and hips. The Danes came to the conclusion that it's actually better to go if you're going to swim 5 miles, okay. Having a stiff fin, nobody. I don't care how tough you think you are. Finning for 5 hours with a stiff fin will break you.
Well, what
Okay.
about the dry suit? Because it's kind of hard to maintain your balance a lot of times in a dry suit, right? Because the air pockets roll and stuff.
There's that, but we were wearing woolens underneath.
Okay.
So you like long johns underneath.
Yeah.
And they had the old-fashioned kind before we had zippers like the O'Neill's suits. Okay. The old-fashioned kind you crawl into through the neck. Okay. Then you get a seal ring. Okay. And then we had the most interesting suntans you can imagine. There was only our hands and faces were exposed to the sun, and in the Danish Combat Swimmer School, you swim on your backs. Not on your front, on your backs. So literally, and it was August and early September when we did this school, so there's good sunshine. And literally, we all of us had a suntan here and were right white everywhere else. I remember the graduation photo. It looked just very odd. All these strange-looking guys that look like aliens that are all dark here and white everywhere else.
But tell us about the guy who dropped the deuce in his dry suit.
Yeah,
gotta hear it.
I
gotta hear this.
don't want to use Joe's name. Okay, Joe, if you're out there, okay, I'm sorry, bud. Joe, we all had this 5 hour swim, and Joe just had to go. Joe had to go, so he took a dump in his dry suit, and once you've been finning for 5 hours, you actually kind of forget how to walk.
Right.
Literally. Okay, so when you get to shore, okay, and then you go to the...
You got your sea legs.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you get up and you waddle in, and you're trying to get out of the dry suit, and as soon as Joe cracked the seal on his dry suit, okay, literally, all of us had just finished 5 hours finning. All of us got up and walked out, okay? None of us felt like it, but it was
biblical.
unpleasant.
It was biblical.
It was biblical. It was.
Yeah,
It
that's.
was-
I mean, even like taking a leak, like that's one of the disadvantages of a dry suit is you can't
Joe-
take a leak in.
Joe,
or-
if you're
or
out
wetsuit.
there, I didn't use your last name. Joe's a common name. So it was fascinating. It was fascinating. And then we went to into an exercise. We went to Jutland over on the mainland, and we ended up doing exercises against the Danish Home Guard. Okay, the Danes don't have a big army, but they do have a significant home guard. And actually, those guys were actually pretty good. We tried coming in on the coastline using the new skills that we acquired, but they had dogs. And their dogs were very good at triangulating our positions. So the dogs could actually sniff us out coming in from the seaside.
Well, that's because you guys were shitting in your dry suit.
Joe, I'm sorry.
The Danes are interesting that they have a small but very professional military.
Yes.
I mean, like all of their privates have college degrees, or a lot of them do. If you see behind Dave, there's a book written by Thomas Rathsack that it is available in English. I mean, I have no like stake in it anymore, but I helped translate it into English and publish it for the American market. It's what's that book called? Is it Jaeger? Yeah. It's just called Jaeger.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's called the Jaeger Corps.
Yeah, he served
That's
it-
their equivalent.
Yeah.
Okay, of special forces in the Danish army is the Jaeger Corps. Those are the guys we were working with over in Jutland.
And he was in Afghanistan and Iraq. A really interesting guy, interesting experiences.
So, as a combat swimmer, then was it all surface swimming? Were you guys not diving, but it was more doing like recon swimming?
We
type
had a
stuff?
scuba team in the company.
Well, I know
Okay.
you guys did, but what I mean for this school and for the operations, and
It was a
whatnot.
different kind of thing, okay? 10th Special Forces Group, at least at that time, was oriented largely as a mountain group, but we also had these fascinating missions in behind Soviet lines.
right.
And we ended up calling ourselves toilet paper TP forces. Use once, throw away. Our job was to infiltrate the old Soviet Union via, or to the Murmansk area, the Kola Peninsula, over the Norway tundra. And while we're doing that, raise Laplanders, guerrillas, to help us. Now, if you're familiar with the Kola Peninsula, Laplanders, elk, reindeer, tundra, and the weather, we had pretty much decided that if we were going to be used in that fashion, we would probably none of us coming back.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And what about at the Belgian Commando school? Like, what sorts? Obviously, it's a different operating environment than what you're used to. What was significant about the Belgian Commando school? Like, what did you learn there? What? Because it's not just a good trip for you. Like, I'm sure that it's
It
a
was
good.
it was a great training opportunity, but anytime you attend a foreign school, you get different perspectives and people with different experiences. So their experience, the Belgians in particular, some of them had worked in the Belgian Congo, okay, and their experience in the Belgian Congo, in Africa, and in World War II and subsequent. What the Belgians, so the Belgian perspective on warfare was quite different. The closer you are to your potential adversary, the more immediate it becomes. So, for example, the Americans are separated by a whole ocean from the Soviet Union back then. Okay, we took it perhaps a little less seriously
Right.
than the Belgians, than the Germans, than the Danes, than the Swedes did. It saw the Soviet Union as a much more immediate threat. Yeah, we took them seriously. Yes, we had a Cold War, and yes, we ultimately won that Cold War. But the fact is that the old Soviet Union actually, in large measure, destroyed itself. It died as a consequence of the contradictions of its own internal issues. So all we had to do, George Kennan, who was the architect of containment theory, was correct. All we had to do is wait for the Soviet Union to die based on the contradictions of its system. And it did. It did. What concerns me now is we seem to have several contradictions in our own system. Okay, and those contradictions that we were talking about earlier this evening, Jack, Iraq and Afghanistan. Previous to that, Vietnam. Most of us were looking for a win. Why go to war if your intention is not to win? And this is the article that I published a month or two ago in the Tampa Bay Times, looking at just that issue. And my friend, Ralph Peters, who many of you know, he's a popular commentator and a former U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel of Military Intelligence. Ralph essentially said, I'll paraphrase him, if we're not going to fight to win, let's not go. Made pretty good sense to me. Hard to argue with
Right.
that perspective. It's fair to ask the question now, where we are right now. why did we go? What did we accomplish? And why? And I think the nation, our national leadership, civilian leadership, and our military leadership need some deep introspection. It's not satisfactory to simply say we made mistakes. It's not satisfactory. It's not enough. Too many people have died as a consequence. Nearly 3,000 American soldiers are dead and in the ground because of this. Over 100,000 Afghans, over 100,000 Iraqis dead. What did we accomplish? And I don't know the answer to that question.
Right.
And I think lots of soldiers who fought in Afghanistan or lost friends there or were terribly scarred physically or psychologically as a consequence of being sent there. The notion that the American global war on terror justifies invading either country and then staying was always to me a gross absurdity. It was just dumb from the get-go. President George W. Bush, Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, all my friends over at the Pentagon told me exactly the same thing, and I heard Wesley Clark talking about this on a video recently. Okay, where did this idea to go to Afghanistan and stay, and then open up a second front, fight a second war in Iraq simultaneously?
Right.
What general do you know that says I want to fight two wars simultaneously?
Right.
Into
It's-
what end?
You know what we need? We need another front.
We need another front.
Yeah.
We need, okay, Afghanistan's not enough. Let's invade Iraq.
Yeah.
Okay? But it all came out of the White House.
Right.
And the point I would remind everybody about is that we have a system whereby the commander-in-chief is a civilian. Okay? He's our commander-in-chief. He says, go invade Afghanistan. Guess what? We'll go invade Afghanistan. We're going to do it. We're going to follow orders. We're good soldiers. But the fact is, we need to start asking better questions because where it ended up is where nobody wants to be.
I had a meeting this morning with a journalist who's senior to me. I won't name here, but he pointed out to me that era, 2003, the lead up to Iraq, that was one of the greatest low points of American journalism ever.
I believe it.
Yeah,
And
that
I
the
know why.
questions were not asked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay? But the real failure is a failure of institutions. And this is what you and I were talking about earlier. And this is in an article that I've yet to publish, that I hope to publish in the relative near term, where I looked at going back to first causes. The first cause is that, from my perspective, the institution of the presidency failed and the institution of the Congress failed. Constitutionally, only the Congress of the United States can declare war. The framers designed it that way to make sure that we didn't go into war willy-nilly.
Right.
That if we were going to go to war, we wanted to make sure it was well-funded, that the strategies chosen were feasible, suitable, and acceptable to the American people. By the way, those are the three means by which we gauge a strategy within the military, and to make sure that we were doing the right thing. We make sure that we don't go to war rapidly, that it's not a rushed decision, that we think about it. Albert Einstein was credited with the saying that most people spend 10% of their time thinking about a problem and 90% of the time trying to fix it, whatever it is. He suggested that those ratios should be reversed. We need to spend 90% of our time thinking about it before we go to war, and then 10% executing it.
Right. Well, it's funny because even in just like standard goal setting, like when you're trying to set a goal and you say, I want to be successful, you go, well, how will I know, like tangibly, how will I know when I'm successful, like definitively? And I think that, and I think Vietnam and maybe even Korea too, but, since then, I don't know that anybody has, when we've gone to war, I don't know that we've known what victory would look like.
No.
I mean, I don't know that anybody ever thought that. Did they really think the Taliban was going to go to sit in Paris with us and sign a surrender? They were going to surrender the Panjshir to us. Like,
Yeah. No, you're right. If you, this is such a difficult thing to talk about because it gets highly emotional for me, and I know it's pretty emotional for you guys too. We've all lost friends, and it's horrible, it's terrible, it's disgusting, it's despicable that so many people are talking about it now rationally. They're appearing on television news programs talking about the mistakes that we made that led to our ultimate defeat in Afghanistan. And those that think that we should have garrisoned Afghanistan for another 20 years,
Right.
100 years, I can assure you that under no circumstances, those individuals, those high-ranking individuals in many cases, that think they could have garrisoned Afghanistan into the next century,
Right.
okay, would not have achieved the goals we hoped for. Not only that, but after spending $2 trillion, according to Brown University, and after losing 3,000 lives, what did we hope to achieve? A strategy starts with an objective. The objectives chosen by the White House, by the Bush administration, were unfeasible, infeasible. We couldn't hope to achieve the transformation of a badly fragmented tribal society
Right.
in one generation. It would have been a multi-generation, it would have taken generations to do it. And the Taliban is going to roll over.
And now we're talking about, nation building, a nicer term for colonialism in some ways. And that was a bad word.
Careful.
A bad
careful.
word in the
Yes.
American lexicon.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to say that.
I spent nearly 20 years with the United Nations. Colonialism is one of those words we stay away from.
Right.
Yeah, for obvious reasons. But the consequence, okay, think about the consequences for a minute. We've already talked about the dead and those who were badly injured by the fact, but now we're looking at the disappointment, the aftermath of the loss. The most we call ourselves the most powerful nation on earth, and perhaps we are, but we've been beaten by a ragtag bunch of light infantry. Why? I think I know why. At least I know one of the contributing factors why. We followed the law of land warfare. We followed the Geneva Conventions, okay? We desperately, especially during the Obama administration, tried to avoid civilian casualties. We always try and avoid civilian casualties. The Taliban, being a sub-state actor, cared about none of those things. They were more than happy to use suicide bombers, and if killing women and children served their ends, that's what they did.
Maybe I look at this differently than other people. I know we left, and I know that we didn't achieve whatever murky goals we had, that, the Taliban never magically disappeared. But like in my mind, I don't see it as a loss. I just feel like we realized that it wasn't, they live there, right? They live there. And
It's their home?
it's their home. Like, how long are you going to stay? And what does victory even mean? What does winning and losing even mean?
That's the question you have to ask yourself first before you ever set foot in another country to engage in armed conflict.
Right.
Ask yourself that question
Absolutely.
first. Answer that question first. Because if you answer that question satisfactorily, and this is what it's supposed to happen, the Congress has that discussion.
Right.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff advise on that discussion, and the President, as the Commander-in-Chief, accepts the responsibility for the execution of that mission. What has happened since the end of World War II is Congress has been sidelined, and Congress apparently likes it that way. They like the fact that the chief executive is the one taking all the responsibility for going to war. But I have to say that successive chief executives of the United States have not done well by that responsibility. Congress needs to assert its responsibility for the declaration of war. Before we go to war, it needs to be seriously thought out.
Right.
We didn't do that.
Right.
And there's
And
just,
this is the result.
there's something just really dark about the fact that the war went on for 20 years and everyone was just sort of seemingly okay with it. There was no anti.
How about that?
There's no real anti-war movement.
Isn't
in
that
America.
fascinating? And you
Yeah.
know, why is that? And I think you know why.
Because everyone was making money off it. It was a
That's a
self-licking
piece of
ice
it.
cream
That's a
cone.
piece of it, but it's a confluence of influences.
Yeah.
Okay? Some people are making money on it.
Thank you.
Okay? Fine. I'll buy that. But there are others, let's say, for example, people within the institutions that we're talking about, within the institutions of the Congress, within the presidency, and within the Pentagon. If you read H.R. McMaster's book, Dereliction of Duty, you'll note that the same story, the same narrative plays itself out over Afghanistan. It's the same story in a different time period, but the similarities are startling.
But even McMaster could not break free from the design.
Isn't that interesting? That even H.R. McMaster, who I admire,
It's,
I admire
it
his
says
book.
it's something that there's a system, that there's a bureaucracy and an institution that we're beholden to.
Within the institutions are people, okay? The commonalities, the similarities are with the human beings that are making these decisions. Why didn't a general stand up and say, we can't win in Afghanistan fighting this way? We can't. It's not going to happen.
Right.
We had general officers that were every bit that smart,
We're about to turn a corner.
okay? Yes.
18
How many
months
corners?
away.
How many corners are we going to turn
All of them.
before we're looking back at ourselves in the mirror?
Right.
How many corners? That's a lot of corners, man. Okay.
Are there corners on this crazy ride?
That's a lot of corners. Okay. The process of rationalization that takes place within their minds. Okay. Every general officer I ever met that was a brigadier, what he wanted was a second star for his flag. That's human. That's human. The one guy that stood up for the truth was Eric Shinseki, the Chief of Staff of the Army, the first Japanese American to serve as Chief of Staff in the American Army. And he told the Secretary of Defense that you can take Iraq with this many soldiers, but it's going to take a lot more to hold it. Shinseki was right. Moreover, in Afghanistan, Karl Eikenberry, former Army Lieutenant General and ambassador in Kabul in 2009, now his no longer secret cable to Hillary Clinton. You've read it?
No.
Okay. It's fascinating. What he suggests to Hillary Clinton at the U.S. State Department is that the plan being devised by the American military, that more soldiers is better, will only create a greater dependency on the part of the Kabul government, which of course it did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which of course it did. Karl Eikenberry was later removed from his position by the Obama administration. You have to wonder why. Now, I don't know. I wasn't in a room when it happened, but I do know that if you have an appreciation for facts and truth, if you have an appreciation for ground truth, you will find yourself at odds with damn near everybody inside the Washington, D.C. Beltway. You will. It's going to happen. Maybe, I suspect, Karl Eikenberry was right. Everyone else was wrong, so he had to go. He had to go.
You told me about, colleagues of yours, and you encountered it yourself at the UN.
Yes.
That, you stand up to the bureaucracy and you say what's plainly true and ostensibly obvious.
It'll destroy you.
Right.
It has to do with principles that I felt. One of the things I loved about the American Army is that it gave me a moral compass. Okay, I embraced that moral compass. I really did. It told me what was right, what was wrong, what's moral, what's ethical, okay? And I loved listening to those classes at Command General Staff College and the branch schools, okay? Damn it, this gives you a compass for steering your life, okay? For doing the right thing. My observation is, unfortunately, tragically, is that perhaps 5%, and I'm being generous, 5% of humanity will stand up and be counted and take a principled stand against those who want to do something stupid. My my friends over at the Pentagon, when we decided we were going to invade Afghanistan and then subsequently Iraq, I started calling friends of mine in the Pentagon, and I think I was in Yemen. So I'm calling them and saying, "What the hell is going on? Why are we invading Iraq? I lived and worked in Iraq previously. Okay, Saddam Hussein doesn't have any weapons of mass destruction. They're not there. But you got George Tenet, head of the CIA, swearing that it's a slam dunk. Mm-hmm. Either he lied or he was dumber than a sneaker full of shit. Choose one. But George Tenet gets the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And I understand he's teaching once in a while over at Georgetown University.
They all did quite well for themselves.
There you go.
We
Everybody who was wrong about it did very, very well for themselves, and that just chaps me.
And I mean, it sounds, perhaps I sound like the bitter Army veteran, Mel Gibson living on his houseboat, looking at the picture of his dead wife holding a Beretta to his head. I don't mean to come out across overly bitter here, but so many young enlisted guys joined up, and they believed in the mission, they believed in doing the right thing, and they served. Some people served 12, 15, 20 deployments over there.
You betcha.
And now they're out of the military.
Yes.
They're retiring.
Yes.
My peers, who I joined the Army with,
Yes.
are now retiring. They're about that age. And they're having to ask themselves some really difficult questions
Yes.
about what this whole war was about
Yes.
and what it means.
Yes.
And everything they dedicated their life to, and that they lost friends along the
Yes.
way. And I can sense that it's a painful experience that's just really beginning.
Massively painful, because and the word I keep on coming back to, and you and I discussed it earlier, is betrayal. I feel betrayed. I feel betrayed by my government. I feel betrayed by our institutions. Okay, now it may not be one individual that I can point a finger at. I can certainly point a finger at George W. Bush, who wanted to go around the world, and he wanted to destroy evil, and that's a wonderful, wonderful aspiration. Unfortunately, evil's been with us for a very long time.
It's a system which is much more difficult to deal with than a person.
Yeah. We're talking about something that's systemic and human. Mm-hmm. Now, how to sort ourselves through that? This is why I said we need a serious period of introspection on the part of the American military and on the part of the American civil leadership. And I'm talking about Congress and the presidency. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that's going to happen. I'm not sure it happened well after Vietnam, but it may happen in the future. We may see people at the War College taking and dissecting these issues issue by issue by issue, because I know people at the Army War College and the Command General Staff College, where I went to school, at the Armed Forces Staff College, that look at this from an academic perspective, but it's beyond the academic. It's horrible. It's disgusting. It's despicable. Everybody wants to forget the dead. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to forget the wounded. Everybody wants to forget it.
You in
Yeah, no. If you watch CNN and you watch some of the former generals that were engaged in this, I won't use any names, okay, talking about, we made some mistakes, okay, and another general says, no, it was a mistake to leave Afghanistan when we did, okay, guys.
You're missing the picture. Yeah.
Everybody needs to wake up and smell the coffee, okay? All these $2 trillion in Afghanistan, I don't know what the total is, okay, but if you took all that money and put it to work, you could create a national health service in the United States overnight, okay? And save a whole bunch of lives. We're wrong. We're going about it wrong. We have a national illness, and the illness is in us, and it's in our systems, it's in ourselves, it's in our institutions, and we need to take a hard look at it.
When I talk to the Vietnam veterans, and I've been fortunate enough to meet incredibly articulate intellectual guys who they came back from Vietnam, they tried to understand their experience.
Yes.
They got PhDs in East Asia studies.
Yes.
They're trying to understand what they went through. And so many of these guys, they had the answers. They understood, if we had a little bit more wisdom, if we had a little bit more empathy for the local people, we spent a little bit more time trying to get to know people on the ground, maybe things could have been a little different. But we study our mistakes, whether it's in an academic setting or people write books, whatever, or memoirs, whatever the case may be. We study these mistakes so that we can repeat them with absolute precision, so that we can walk right back in and do it all
We have
over
repeated
again.
it. So the problem is us.
Yeah, yeah.
We are the problem. And first step in fixing a problem is to recognize that you're the issue. So we all need to look internal and say, okay, we have something wrong. There's something wrong over at the Pentagon, there's something wrong in the Congress, there's something wrong in the presidency, okay? And we need to take a look at these things. The framers' wisdom throughout, these were really bright people, and their wisdom has withstood the test of time. And when we have diverged from their wisdom, guess what? We end up with lots of more and more dead people.
Yeah. The Constitution isn't the problem here.
No.
That's actually the good part.
The thing with the framers, though, is that
Damn.
they all had personal experience with combat, with war. You know,
Many of them did.
Many of them did.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
The French and Indian Wars in particular.
and I think right now, at least, you know, since Vietnam, you know, which was, you know, ended in the early 70s, you know, that's 50 years ago, right? So, like, how many people in our political system are those people? So, you know, it's like Jack said, that a lot of the veterans from Vietnam were trying to understand it. They would go get degrees or PhDs in East Asian studies. But how many of those people went into politics? How many of those people went into policy? And so it's the people who are learning the lessons aren't necessarily the people who are making the decisions.
I'm worried that your points are all well made. My concern is that we seem to have an inability to look at the facts of the matter and look internal to
Right.
ourselves and look for the answers. Instead, what I see playing out is a lot of finger pointing and chest beating from the political right or the political left,
Right.
okay? But in many cases, I see the political right being captive by its own ideology. So
Uh-huh.
their ideology determines what their position is going to be.
Right.
And then they support that position. But in order to do that, they sacrifice their own individual rationality.
Uh-huh.
It's another form of tribalism. Now, I see this on both the extreme political left and the extreme political right.
Sure.
But these are the same people in large measure.
Right, I
These are
agree.
people looking for extreme solutions.
Right.
The rarity, the most important kind of person we need is those who are centered, who can look at both sides of an issue, who are practical, rational, compassionate, and at the end of the day, express themselves with some degree of kindness.
Mm-hmm.
My almost 20 years with the United Nations, what I think I learned was that the highest human aspiration, what should be the highest human aspiration, is empathy, compassion, and in other words, simple kindness.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen kindness breach gaps between peoples, between cultures that are disparate all over the globe.
I know that we aren't.
Everybody understands kindness.
Right. We talked about this in the last time you were on, but for the people who haven't seen that and may not go back and watch it because there's so much content, you had a story about going. Was it in Yemen? In Yemen.
Yeah, I was thinking of the same thing.
Can you tell us that story? Because I think
Well,
that
which story? I got a lot of Yemen
The
stories.
one where you
Went
got
out-
surrounded by
Yeah.
the entire camp where there
Oh, the refugee
because,
camp.
Because I think that really illustrates what you're saying right now.
Okay. I get a call in up in Sana, I'm in national headquarters. I get a call from the head of UNHCR, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. We have a Somali refugee camp in the southern Yemeni desert. He says there's a detainment situation ongoing. We don't know whether it's a hostage situation or a detainment, but we call it a detainment situation because we simply don't know. There's been no demands for ransom, and that would define a hostage situation. So I flew down from Sanaa to Aden. One of the drivers picked me up and took me straight out. It was 2.5 hours over bad roads to get to the Somali refugee camp. And I get there and I find out that essentially all of the UNHCR staff and the implementing partners from INGO communities are there, and they're being held captive by the Somalis. Why? Well, there's been an accusation of rape against the camp commander, who is ostensibly, reportedly, allegedly, has raped one of the Somali girls, one of the refugees. And the refugees now want blood, and there's going to be a confrontation. Now, the Yemenis have guns. The Somalis do not. There are thousands more Somalis, though, and they're headed toward one another. So I'm trying to figure out how the hell I'm going to stop this bloodbath from taking place. And everybody's looking to me for answers. I'm the guy that flew in from the national capital. I'm the white guy, okay? I'm the only white guy
You're not
there.
like NYPD.
No,
Like,
no, no.
There ain't no clear answers here.
There's
on
no
it.
clear answers. There's no clear answers. There's no policy. There's no precedent. There's nothing to tell me what to do.
Right.
Okay? So, make a long story shorter, okay? I started walking toward, there's maybe 5, 6, 7,000 pissed off Somalis heading in my direction, and they're going to meet with the Yemenis who have guns, and there's going to be a bloodbath. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to stop this. So I start walking toward the Somalis, and I convince the Yemeni commander to take his troops and put them back in the barracks. And while I'm walking toward all these pissed off Somalis, I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? Because I have no clue what I'm going to do. I know everybody's looking to me for an answer, and I don't have one. And then I sat down in the dirt. And maybe 50 meters away, the Somalis are coming. And I was terrified. I figured, yeah, I'm probably toast.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, but I'm sitting in the dirt, and I don't want to look up because I'm really afraid to look up. And then there's dust and dirt and noise, and suddenly I'm surrounded by 5,000 Somalis. Okay, they stopped.
Holy shit.
And then the Somali elders, I can't barely see. I look up and I'm sweating. It's 120 degrees in the shade. I'm sweating, and there's dust and dirt, and I can just barely see through the haze the Somali elders sitting in front of me. Okay, and over the next 45 minutes, we conducted a conversation translating my English into Arabic into Somali, okay, and then back and forth, and I finally get an agreement from them that I will conduct an investigation of the accusation of rape against the camp commander, and then I will give a report, not to the camp commander, not to the United Nations, but to the refugees, who are generally the most powerless people and hopeless and powerless people on the face of the earth. Mm-hmm. So the fact that somebody that looks like me is willing to do that for them, they go back to the camp. Again, making a long story very short, okay, I conducted my investigation, found out there was in fact no rape. It was a false accusation, and the individual who made that accusation may not still be breathing. But that's one of the questions we don't like to ask ourselves.
Right.
There was an interesting backstory on why that even came about, why they made that.
One of the things that's messy about life is you often don't know the answers to the questions, okay? Only in books. Only in books do authors give you all the answers to all the questions,
right.
Okay? In my life, there's a lot of outstanding questions I don't know the answers to. However, in this particular camp, there were, let's say, for example, there were 10,000 Somali refugees in the camp. And let's also say that the World Food Program was providing 16,000 rations. So 6,000 rations a day are going into this camp over and above what's actually required. I pointed this out to the World Food Program people. They knew. Now, America provides the bulk of the funding for the World Food Program. Where are these foodstuffs going? Who's benefiting from them? It's a black market. I suspect that the Somalis are benefiting from it. I suspect that the Yemenis are benefiting. Somebody is benefiting from it. Now, if you ask too many questions, okay, you might end up in a shallow desert in the South Yemeni Desert, okay?
You might end up out of a job.
Yes. Okay. So, better take care. So what I did was I went back to Sinai, talked to the head of the WFP, and I pointed out to him that there are perhaps a lot more rations going in here than there are actual refugees. Eventually, they did take action. I forced his hand, I think. And we went back down there and conducted a recount of the refugees in the camp and adjusted the number of rations going in appropriately. So now we're in, if you will, we're on the side of the angels now. But getting there, we put 4 Somalis in the hospital because they didn't benefit from this.
Right.
Okay, not everybody liked the idea. Okay, but I anticipated that possibility, had an ambulance standing nearby, nobody was killed. The fact that nobody was killed, when you look at one of my observations about the evacuation of Kabul, because I was responsible for conducting the evacuation of Freetown, Sierra Leone, when it was being invaded by the Revolutionary United Front. Okay? And for all those guys out there that think there's such a thing as a pretty evacuation, there aren't. There aren't. There's no such thing as a pretty evacuation. They're all ugly. All of them. I've been there, done it. They're all ugly. Why? Because there are bad actors out there that are going to take advantage of the circumstance. And guess what? Nobody can anticipate all the possibilities. Now, do I think we could have done a better job in Kabul? Clearly, yes, we could have. However, the Biden administration was actually executing the deal that the Trump administration agreed to. There's plenty of blame to go around. We got a lot of people out. Could we have done better? Yes, absolutely we could have done better. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We did a hell of a good job. I feel terrible for the families of the Marines, in particular, who were killed in Kabul airport. But there's no such thing as a pretty evacuation.
Yeah.
They're all ugly.
Yeah, and it was honorable what they did over there, and they did evacuate like over 100,000 people. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Pretty amazing. They did a hell of a job. Now, you can argue with the Biden administration about withdrawing. You can also talk about, okay, maybe we could plan on putting a garrison in Afghanistan and keeping it there for another 100 years. But that wouldn't have changed the outcome.
Folks out there listening, if you have questions for Bob, please get them in. We'd be happy to ask them.
Yeah.
And also, we got to have a word from our sponsor
We
here
do.
for tonight's show.
From one of our favorite sponsors, actually.
MANSCAPED. You're going to love this, Bob.
Now, Bob, you are a well-groomed man.
Huh?
You're a well-groomed man.
My wife probably agrees, but yes. Okay.
But something that is kind of, I don't know, taken mankind to the next level.
Yeah.
Is male grooming, is grooming our nether regions so that we are in sticky situations that our whole body isn't sticky.
Like in Yemen in summer, for instance.
Exactly.
Where, you're trying to, you got to get your man spread on.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Manscaped is a male grooming product for those of you who don't know. And for any of you guys who have ever tried to, kind of do the old buzzer trick with your hair down there.
You might get a Purple Heart for that.
Yeah, it's definitely some self-inflicted damage goes on. But with Manscaped, they have a special trimmer. It's the Lawnmower 4.0, right? 4.0. Yeah, 4.0 they're already up to. It's got a little ceramic shield on it so that you can shave close, you don't nick. It's got a nice little LED light that illuminates the area so you can see what's going on.
I used it this week.
Yeah.
I can't show you because we'll get kicked off of YouTube.
Check out Jack's OnlyFans.
And I'll leave.
Yeah. Check out Jack's OnlyFans. And
There's some things I just don't need to know.
And so they, in addition to the Lawnmower 4.0, which is really nice, they have the Ball Tonic.
There's an ear trimmer and a nose trimmer.
The ear and nose trimmer is really nice. And then the What's the what else is it? Because they have the tonic, the aftershave.
There's
and
an aftershave. You got an aftershave, Dave? You got a deodorant? I didn't get an aftershave or a deodorant.
Oh, they keep you fresh.
Wow.
They keep you fresh.
I need another drink.
So yeah, for any of you guys out there, plus, they say when you're shorn, it makes you more pronounced.
Folks, use
Hey, you didn't say that.
Check
You
out.
didn't say that. Okay. You're trying to say it makes you look bigger? Is that it?
So I've heard.
that's what he was implying.
So
Yeah.
I've heard.
Okay.
Manscaped.com. Use the promo code Team20 and you'll get free shipping on your first order, folks. Team20 promo code. Go there and use it.
Check them out. You'll like them.
All right, back to our regularly scheduled program.
Yeah. Yeah, I just have, I guess, a bit of a different perspective than, I feel like we accomplished our mission in Afghanistan when we first showed up. I mean, what our goal was with AQ.
The CIA supported the 5th Special Forces Group entry into Afghanistan. It was highly successful across the board. We won battle after battle after battle by making the Northern Alliance our allies. We did so successfully, and we actually drove the Taliban out of Kabul. At that point, what we probably should have done is sent a harshly worded note to the Taliban and said, look, you guys do anything like this, you continue to provide succor to Al-Qaeda, okay, we'll be back.
Right.
And we'll be back with a vengeance.
Right.
Okay, we packed our bags and headed downrange, come back to the United States. It would have been, it's called a strategic raid.
Right.
And it's based on strategic thinking.
Right.
And it's important that we understand that. The key decision that was made that put us in the position that we're in now is that we stayed.
Right.
We never should have stayed
Right.
in Afghanistan. We didn't learn the lessons that the British taught us. We didn't learn the lessons that the Russians taught us. We thought we were so arrogant. We thought we were different. We were somehow better. That we were somehow blessed by God.
Right.
Hubris.
None of those things is true.
I mean, I do not know what the British and the Russian mission was there. I don't think we should have stayed. However, when I was there, and you're fighting side by side with Afghans who the Taliban does not represent the majority of the Afghans, I don't know if that, and I agree with you. I mean, Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if that necessarily aligns with.
Let me start by saying that we start with an understanding that Afghanistan doesn't exist.
Right, I agree.
Okay?
Sure.
It's lines on a map.
Right.
But the notion that Afghan identity
Right.
exists
That there's a national identity.
is a misnomer.
Right.
It
Yeah.
doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
What there is a series of tribes, and those tribes have loyalties. What makes America great in part is our loyalty to the nation state of America, but that it's not loyalty to the nation state. It's loyalty to the aspirations stated in our founding documents within the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. That's our loyalty.
Right.
That's what we're loyal to. Not the presidents.
Right.
Not the congressmen.
Right.
Not the generals. Okay? And understand that those documents remain aspirational. These are things we're trying to live up to. Now, are we succeeding? No, I suspect not. However, I believe that so long as we aspire to be better than the sum of our parts, if we continue to aspire to live up to the words within those documents, we will be the better for it. For example, you look at the founding documents of the United Nations. They were based on our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, okay? And in part written by Eleanor Roosevelt. We, in large measure, created the United Nations. We created it. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't exist without us. And the fact is that we need the United Nations, like it or not. It's a better world with the UN in it. We have a lot of soul searching to do. And I'm afraid, I'm terrified that we're not going to do it. Because we seem to be sleepwalking as a society, as a culture, through our lives. We seem to be, we're watching Kim Kardashian's doing something. And then I look at some of the programs on television, in reality TV, and I'm stunned at the only word I can think of is it's inane. It's stupid. It's absurd. Why are people watching these things? Are their lives so utterly meaningless? Are they so without meaning and purpose in their lives that they sit in front of a television screen and watch?
But the answer might be yes, and that's
that's terrifying.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Yeah.
That's terrifying to me.
But I mean, I think, isn't this sort of, unfortunately, like a base trait of humanity, right? I mean, in Rome, it was bread and circus, right?
Or the vanities are coming.
And like daytime soap operas have always been big, and now the media has caught that, right? The media, there are 8 things going on the screen at once, and everything is a breaking story, And when I say the media, I just mean the 24-hour cable networks. I probably regular network news is fine. I don't know.
If you're old enough, you remember ABC, NBC, CBS, and you remember Walter Cronkite and Tom Brokaw and these guys who just went on the TV and reported the news. I remember those days, and I missed those days. I'm not interested in what the opinion of a journalist. I'm sorry. I'm not interested in your opinion. I want you to report the news. Give me the news. I'll make up my own mind whether I think what I have heard and what you have told me has value and significance. What has happened is that at that time, ABC, NBC, CBS, none of those newsrooms made any money for their companies.
Right.
Okay? None of them made any money. Now all of them make money.
Right.
It's not...
Not all of them make money.
Well, okay. Let's say some of them make money now. Okay? Some of them make money. I understand what you're saying. Okay.
No, they really don't.
Yeah.
ABC is underwater, man.
I understand. Okay. But look at who they're competing with.
Sure.
Right.
Okay. You look at Rupert Murdoch. Okay. And this is a consequence of what we discussed earlier. Okay. Unfettered predatory capitalism on an international scale, where Rupert Murdoch owns the Wall Street Journal and Fox News. And Roger Ailes, now deceased, creates something called niche reporting. He created it. And essentially telling conservative Americans, I'm a lifelong political conservative, telling conservative Americans exactly what they want to hear. And making money on it. It's their business model. So the truth
Not a
doesn't
business
exist.
model.
It's
Not
not.
a-
It's not an issue.
No.
It's not an issue. The truth is not an issue. Facts are no longer at issue. All we're talking about is positions. Rupert Murdoch's media company makes money by telling conservative Americans what they want to hear, what reinforces their opinions, their predilections, their belief systems.
I saw a clip from your friend Ralph Peterson.
Yeah, Ralph Peters.
Ralph Peters, I'm sorry. Where he was talking about that. He was a Fox News commentator.
Yes, he
And
quit.
he was saying, I got to a point where I was sitting in the blue room and I felt like I was in a freak show.
Yes. When Ralph quit, I think I was in Rome at the time, I sent Ralph a congratulatory note for quitting Fox News. Ralph being an insider, and he was getting paid very well for being a strategic analyst for Fox News. He was being paid for it. He acted against self-interest. That is my definition of honor, acting honorably. It was against his interest. Fox News put money in his pocket.
Well, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot and speak for Ralph, but do you know what that breaking point was for him where he was like, this is too far for me, I'm not...
No, not the precise breaking point, but Ralph and I had several discussions previous to that, and I essentially disagreed with many of the positions that were taken on Fox News, on particularly the opinion programs, that were repetitive. Essentially, it's propaganda. Okay, when I was serving in the Army, for a while I served as a psychological operations officer. I wasn't very good at it. Okay, full disclosure, I was not a good psychological operations officer. However, I did learn how to recognize propaganda. And Fox News and the opinion programs are pure, unmitigated, no bullshit, all day, every day propaganda. So I wrote an article that appeared in the Tampa Bay Times that said, why is Fox News still appearing on the Armed Forces Network? Why is propaganda? Why are we putting propaganda on the Armed Forces Network and rebroadcasting it to soldiers all over the world? It's not truthful. These opinion programs are not truthful. Tucker Carlson had to go to court in a defamation case, and a judge made a determination that the case was going to be thrown out because Tucker Carlson couldn't be taken seriously. In other words, you can't believe what this guy is saying.
Well, his own attorney argued, what wasn't the argument
Yes.
that no one would take this program seriously because
Yes,
it's not
unfortunately, many people do.
serious. Yeah.
But I mean, to be fair, we have the exact. I mean, it's all propaganda now. I mean, Rachel Maddow or those pundits are no more. I mean, CNN just had to settle that suit with that kid, and the Washington Post had to settle that suit.
Here-
Like,
but
it's a business model for all of them.
Here's where I disagree.
Okay.
Here's where I disagree. It's a matter of degree, if you will. Okay? CNN, MSNBC, certainly. I understand. Okay? And as I told you before, I'm a lifelong political conservative.
Sure.
Okay? So I see it. I know it. I can feel it. Okay? Yes. These are the extremes. And there are extremes over on this end and this end. However, only one, well, actually, let me take that back. There are several. Breitbart, CNN, what is it, News One? Or One News? OAN, and one more.
Newsmax?
Newsmax. There they are, okay? Their business model is they deal in propaganda. It's their business model. There are journalistic ethics at CNN. They do make an attempt to tell the truth. Do they screw up sometimes? Absolutely. Why are they imperfect? Because we are. You're imperfect, as you and me, okay? They're going to screw up from time to time.
But does it? Are they screwing up when they're generally only screwing up in one direction?
Okay.
When they're obviously leaning one
Now,
direction?
let me explain the difference.
Okay.
Okay? Those people that are on the left, progressives, okay, liberals perhaps, one of the undeniable facts is that the overwhelming majority of the journalists on the left, and you've run into many of them, all have similar views.
Mm-hmm.
But they have similar views because they've all been to college. They've all been to college. They went to the University of Missouri, one of the best journalism schools, Columbia, okay?
I didn't go to journalism school.
Okay, but they've all gone to the same schools, or many of them similar. So they become, what does college do to you? Okay, it expands your vision. You start seeing the world differently.
Uh-huh.
So you see more.
Well, it's a filter like the military. It's like you go into the military and we become less like ourselves and we become more like everyone around us.
Yes. Okay, all those things are true. But the overwhelming majority of the on-air personalities in CNN went to similar kinds of schools. Okay? Their prejudices are based in those experiences, but it's not their business model. That's just them. The editors that tell the on-air personalities to select what stories we're going to see, select those stories that serve from their perspective, okay, because they have a broader vision, perhaps, a different storyline, a different narrative. But it's not their business model. That's their inbred prejudices. We're all biased. Mm-hmm. We're all prejudiced. Hey, I've never met anybody that isn't racist in some way or another, okay? The best of us wake up in the morning and say, today I'm not going to make decisions based on my racist leanings. Those are the best of us. We all have issues. We all have things we got to deal with. But the fact is, the best of us decide that we're not going to act on them today.
So, okay, I see what you're saying. So you're saying that for for like Murdoch's business.
It's his business model.
It's
his
a
business model to lie. And he does on a regular recurring basis. And it's his editorial policy. And he makes the policy for the Wall Street Journal and for Fox News. It is their business model to lie. And they do on a regular recurring basis. They do it all day, every day. And they make a bundle of money doing it.
That's interesting. I mean, I just, I don't trust, well, Jack knows this, I don't trust media at all. Like, I've been involved in a few situations where,
Don't trust media.
yeah,
I don't trust media,
Yeah.
okay? Because it's human beings that are talking to me. So one of the things that I do, my wife and I have a cup of coffee and watch the news every morning, okay? I watch a news program, it's something about Yemen or something about Iraq, where I've been, where I have knowledge, okay? And I look at that and say, I'm not sure about that, okay? And I pull out my trusty phone and I do an internet search very quickly and I go like, that's it. They screwed up. They screwed up. The report is mistaken. They got half of it right, half of it wrong, okay? They're imperfect, but you get to decide. The difference is that they're going to, Fox News is going to give you the pablum all day, every day.
Well, we've had those conversations before where, I report on special operations and the intelligence community, and I know more or less most of the people who are reporters in that world.
Sure.
And, I can look at that and say, oh, this guy got this thing right, and he got this thing wrong. And this story's sort of right, but not all the way right.
Sure.
But then there's another that let's talk about like economics, and a story about quantitative easing or something like that. And I look at that, I have no basis from which to judge it and say, is that true or not?
Right.
And so you have to sort of look at it from the position of John Q. Public. Like that's their frame of reference. They look at that. They look at, let's say, a story I write. They don't know. They don't have any basis from which to judge that.
Right.
And to, like an inside knowledge to say.
But if you
is this
go
true or
back to
not?
if you go back to free speech, okay, and free speech really is the issue. It's the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, okay. Essentially says you can say, and if you go to the legal issue, here's the legal standard, okay. You can't go into a crowded auditorium and yell fire if there's no fire, okay.
Right.
Then you're endangering others.
Right.
So how do you make that determination? The lies that are being told regularly, repetitively, all day, every day by Fox News opinion programs, okay?
Dilutes the whole
Okay,
process,
they're
yeah.
called opinion programs, okay? But they are lies. They're conspiracy theories, okay? They're designed to do one thing, to put money in Rupert Murdoch's pocket. That's what it's doing. That's what unfettered, predatory capitalism is. That defines it. Now, what interest does Rupert Murdoch, an Australian, have in the continuation or the profitability of the United States of America? You remember Spock, live long and prosper, okay? May you live long and prosper. Here in a minute, what does that mean?
We have a class that's deconstructing society, and they're pretty open about it. I mean, in some cases, Steve Bannon is saying he's a Leninist. Deconstructing society.
Well, it sounds like anarchist now.
Right.
But I'm stunned every day. I'm only rarely in the United States, as you know, and I'm leaving again on the 1st of November. So the ringside seat that I have observing America is actually outside the United States, and my news sources are not CNN or Fox News. Okay, they're France 24, BBC, and DW, Germans.
And it is a really interesting experience when you leave the country for a while, for 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever it is, and you're unplugged from all of that, and then you come back and just like turning on cable news for 5 minutes, and it will literally hurt your brain to watch it.
I've been living outside the United States for, I guess, most of my adult life. But I'm still, everywhere I go, I'm an American.
Yeah.
And I'm judged by that standard.
Yeah.
I'm stunned over and over again. My wife, for example, was born in Egypt. She always had America on this pedestal, and she and I have discussed this. Okay, so she had America on this pedestal. It hurts her massively to see the hatred being bandied about in our Congress and some of the nutcases. Some of the things that are going on within our Congress where people are just pointing fingers at one
Right.
another, okay? Not talking, not communicating, just spewing hatred. All, and it's hurtful to her. And she's going like, I always thought we'd end up retiring here in the United States. I'm not sure that's going to happen now, because everywhere I look, there's somebody complaining about having to wear a mask. They believe somehow that they should have the right not to wear a mask, and if they do have COVID, to spread it to others, okay? And if they die of that, well, that's just luck of the draw.
Well, we talked about it a little bit before, and for like you and I, Bob, have both had these experiences. You told me you've had guys that you've known for 50 years that you can't talk to anymore because, and I've had
They refuse to talk to me.
and I've had a similar experience where in this one particular case, somebody who I don't talk to anymore, and that's my choice because it just got too difficult. It got
Yeah.
too painful to
Yeah.
continue that conversation.
Yeah. My observation is that, okay, let me back up a little bit. Service with the United Nations. I've been accused of drinking the UN Kool-Aid, okay? That Bob has gone from being a right-wing Republican to a left-wing liberal because he's been impacted by his Egyptian wife or by the United Nations, okay? And the liberals have infected me. No. What I've done is I've had an opportunity to see the rest of the world. I've had an opportunity to see humanity at both its best and its worst. I've had an opportunity to see a country, Sierra Leone, where rape was the national sport. The RUF engaged in raping women from the ages of 7 to 70 as a national sport. They grabbed women off buses and dragged them into the bush, made them bushwives or sex slaves. Half the population of Afghanistan is women, but they no longer have a voice. That's not because of us. We didn't do that.
Right.
Okay? They no longer have a voice. What is to be done about them? What is America willing to go to war for? Okay? Is it only narrow self-interest? Is that why we're going to go to war? Why did George Bush decide to go to war in Afghanistan? We needed to have a response to 9/11. Did we choose the right target? Did we? Did we choose the right objective? Did we choose the right strategy? I think the answer is no. Did we kill Osama bin Laden? Was that the goal and aspiration? Was that the sine qua non? Is that what comes before victory? Okay, we killed Osama. How much money did we spend doing that? Okay? How much money have we spent through the TSA here in the United States? Okay? Protecting all Americans. When did Americans become such pussies?
Yeah.
Okay? I don't get it. Okay? So somebody sits in the White House and says, my job is to protect all Americans everywhere. Really? Okay? When did we become them?
We're just scared
Okay.
all the time.
We're Americans, damn it. What does being an American mean? Okay? Americans to me has always meant, okay, we're risk takers. We've always been risk takers.
Right.
Okay? We face down threats. Okay? We're the guys we're the cavalry.
Well,
Okay? Or we should be.
I think it's very telling where we are, and this is, I think the politicians play this really well because, while they focus on these hot button issues, whatever it is, whatever the issue is, and it changes every day. But they all eat at the same restaurants, they all drink at the same bars, they all send their kids to the same schools, they all vote the same way for their own raises, they all vote the same way to ease up their insider trading restrictions, and every year or that it comes up, or every how many ever years it comes up, they always vote to renew and expand the Patriot Act. Like, it never stops. You give the government power, they keep on taking power, and while they keep people fighting, they don't. We, as long as we want our person to win more than anything, we're not going to hold our politicians accountable.
Okay. Now, to our politicians for a minute. If you understand the definition of unfettered predatory capitalism, if you understand that, it's all about greed. And if you understand that it takes millions of dollars to get elected to Congress, It takes millions of dollars to get elected to a Senate seat. It takes millions more to get elected President of the United States. Where does all this money come from?
Right.
Well, the preponderance of it comes from rich people.
Mm-hmm.
What the 1%, what I call the new nobility,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and they've got lots and lots and lots of money. And if you notice during COVID, okay, the inequality, the inequity grew and grew and grew and grew. So now that there's at least two Americas based on financial matters. So you have Americans who are no longer Americans, who may carry American passports, but they live in Portugal, or they live in Tahiti, okay, because they have the funds by which to do it, and they go anywhere they want, anytime they want, and they're completely detached from America in general. I'm disturbed by the lie that's been promulgated by many in the right wing that the rich somehow suffer for America, okay? I have never met a rich man serving in an American military uniform. Have you?
I've met people who came from rich families on a few occasions.
Okay. Very few. Very few.
How do you define rich?
Okay. Well, I guess millions and millions, billions and billions, okay?
Not billions, but millions.
Yeah, millions and millions. Those people that don't have to, okay? And
It's
are
very rare.
detached-
It's very
Yes.
rare to find something
Okay,
like that. Yeah.
let's agree that I have never met a rich person who was serving in an American military uniform. You may have, okay? But can we admit it's a rarity?
yeah.
Okay, so how do these rich people bleed for America? Interestingly, there's only a certain class that wears a uniform, and that class goes to war and dies. Another class benefits. I've got a problem with that. I've got a problem with the all-volunteer army. Okay, it's lovely, it's costly, but the fact is, all Americans, from all walks of life, no matter what their dad does, no matter how much money they have, should be participating in some kind of national service. We're all Americans, damn it, and everybody needs to pay. Now, if you're not, then it looks a lot like the old nobility, when earls and barons and kings and
cavalry.
princes, okay, they're the ones that made all the laws, they're the ones that made all the rules, and you lived under those rules. I have a problem with that, and it's not what the founders intended.
And that's why it's becoming that it's like a family tradition
Yeah.
to serve in the military.
Yeah. And that's wonderful. I think it's wonderful that there are family traditions. My father served in the military. I served in the military. My brother served in the military. I have a brother who's a Black Hawk pilot. I'm enormously proud of him. He spent 20 years in uniform. I'm enormously proud of him. But the fact is, the sacrifices that are made for America are made by those who don't have.
A small percentage of the population.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm afraid that's the case.
Let me hit some viewer comments here real quick. Andrew says, during World War I, the French Foreign Legion had a half-liter wine ration per day.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I worked with the French Foreign Legion in Cambodia. They were a great bunch. They were absolutely a great bunch. We were mortared by the Khmer Rouge one evening, right after a regimental dinner. We emptied 2 cases of Beaujolais. Okay, okay. The mortar attack occurred about 2:00 in the morning. Okay, we're all in the revetted area. Okay, ducking like this.
After this guy finishes his big class warfare speech and I was talking about drinking.
Beaujolais.
Yeah.
Well, it was good Beaujolais.
But with the French Foreign Legion.
With the French Foreign Legion, they were a great bunch.
CC says, America screwing up policing missions is a tradition. We fought the Banana Republic Wars for over 36 years and over 3 continents after the Spanish-American War. And Jerry J., can you share your opinion about Kofi Annan?
Kofi Annan, yes, I can. Kofi Annan wrongly and unjustly accused me of being responsible for the deaths of 22 people and over 150 wounded in Baghdad. He is a product of his culture. Okay, he's deceased now. 2 years before I published my book, I told him about my book and what I was writing about, and I asked him several questions, all of which he refused to answer. The bottom line is that at the end of the day, Kofi Annan was a product of his culture. Now, what that means is, and I'm going to have to explain corruption. Everybody thinks they understand what corruption is. You don't understand what corruption is in the context of Central Africa unless you lived and worked there. In Central Africa, for millennia, first loyalties were to self, family, village, and tribe. Nation state doesn't fit in there anywhere. It doesn't fit then, and it doesn't fit now. Kofi Annan brought his culture with him into the United Nations. Kofi Annan presided over the single largest, most corrupt program in the history of the United Nations, the Iraq Oil for Food program. $60 billion. $60 billion. He negotiated it, and Boutros Boutros-Ghali, it was under his administration. Millions and billions of dollars poured into the United Nations coffers as a consequence of the corruption of the Oil for Food program by Saddam Hussein. But the United Nations benefited from that. The headquarters of the World Food Program, it's a very nice headquarters in Rome, I've been in there, was built with money from the Oil for Food program. And Kofi Annan, I'm sorry, was corrupt. I know he's a hero to many people around the world. He was the first black African to be made Secretary General of the United Nations. But for me, he was an abject failure because he failed to live up to the aspirations stated by the UN Ethics Office, and he violated his oath of office, and I can prove it. Now, what's interesting about this, as I was over at the United Nations today talking with some old friends of mine, they asked me a similar kind of question. And the fact is, nobody, and I mean nobody, in a senior position wants to revisit what happened in Baghdad. Nobody. Everybody's gone silent. Nobody wants to say a damn thing about it. And for reasons which might have a great deal to do with self-interest. So,
They just want to sweep it under the rug.
yes, and leave it swept under the rug. My book brings the truth to light. But the fact is, interestingly, most people really aren't interested in the truth. The truth is boring, it's mundane. It's,
Right.
Yeah, I'm surprised at the number of people that really don't care.
We read his book, Surviving the United Nations. Hope you guys will go give it a read and pick it up. I thought it was a fascinating book.
It will definitely give you insight, insight into things that you had no idea of.
Dickie says, looking forward to reading your book, brother. Jerry, did I leave? Jerry says, why do we still have the Patriot Act? That's a whole other subject we kind of got into. Here we go. Jim G. What is the most reliable and unbiased TV news channel? The Economist and BBC are good, but what U.S. sources, if any, do you trust?
I trust none of them. Let's start out by saying I trust nobody, ever, okay, in terms of media. Everybody gets it wrong from one time or another, okay? I trust myself. I've been a military intelligence officer. I've been a Special Forces analyst. I've been an S2 in a Special Forces battalion, okay? I've done threat and risk analysis in 15 different countries, okay? I trust myself. I trust myself. So I'll look at multiple different news sources, and as I've said, BBC is good. The Economist is very good, by the way. France 24, also very good. I'm distrustful of the Americans only because of unfettered predatory capitalism. Everybody's interested in making money. And what that means is editors end up choosing stories that they think Americans are going to want to see and
Yeah,
be
yeah,
interested
yeah.
in, that's going to make their advertisers happy.
But there are some that are like, if you look at like that chart that is like the media bias chart, you know,
Yeah.
things like that.
I saw that. Chart.
There are some outlets that are more reliable than others,
Mm-hmm.
some that are more trustworthy than others. Like if you write for the Wall Street Journal or the Economist or
Mm-hmm.
Reuters or the Associated Press, it's a little bit harder to fake the funk
Yes.
than if you're writing for some of these other outlets.
I agree, and it all depends on the editors. It really does.
Yeah.
And I've worked with editors on, like you, a dozen different publications. I've worked with editors. Okay, some really are serious about journalistic ethics. Okay, they ask me questions like, "What's your source on that?" Okay, how do you know that to be true? Well,
Right.
I can look at them and say, "Well, I was there. I saw it with my own eyes." Okay, okay, got it, good, because I'm not the usual journalist. Okay, been there, done that. But it's important to look at multiple different sources of information that make up your own mind, okay? And do what I did. Go to my phone, go to my laptop, okay, do a little research and say, yeah, no, that reporter got
Well,
that right.
I think a big problem is that like the average person is not Bob Adolph. They're not Jack Murphy. Like I can pick up a phone and I
Yeah.
can call people and I can like
Okay.
say, hey, is this true? Is this not? The average, I think
No,
about the
you're right.
average American
You're
selling
right.
life insurance out there on the street. He
You're
goes
right.
home at 5 p.m.
No,
Sits
you're
down
right.
in front of the TV.
You're right. Which is why I think the Fairness Doctrine needs to be reinstituted in the United States. Are you familiar with the Fairness Doctrine?
I mean, I'm not like a lawyer, but I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those that don't know about the Fairness Doctrine, it essentially says that news media organizations must, and it's not in existence right now, but it used to be, news organizations must present both sides of an issue. Okay, so if you're going to present this side, okay, and take a position, you must present the opposing position as well. It's called the Fairness Doctrine. Interestingly, it was done away by the Obama administration. Why, I don't know. Okay, maybe the Democrats thought they had a lever there or something. I don't know. I don't know what happened. But we need a reinstitution of the Fairness Doctrine, desperately. And news needs to be taken out of,
Entertainment.
yes, but it needs to be taken out of the money. If capitalism is going to be everything for us,
Right.
and we're going to get our news given to us in terms of pablum, because these are the things we want to hear. We desperately want to hear good news. One of the things that I was stunned about, you go to Europe, you'll never, ever find a news program about a kitten stuck in a tree or about somebody's dog. You're not going to get it.
Are
Here
the
in America,
pandas having sex?
yeah,
Right.
that's
Are the
it.
pandas
Okay,
having
it's
sex,
about somebody's
Bob?
parakeet, somebody's dog, somebody's cat, and I'm going like, okay, that's lovely. I'm a dog lover too, but it's not news.
Well, I mean, I think ultimately, like media, especially like television media, they need to like announce at the beginning of the show whether they're entertainment or they're news, and if they are news, they need to be held to certain
yeah,
standards.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
Is it opinion or is it
right?
Yeah.
And they need to say that at the top of the show to tell everybody.
Because opinion is okay, but let people know.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And the other thing though is that one, I feel as though so many, you know, everybody wants to get the scoop, right? So they will jump to conclusions a lot. I remember when we were in Guantanamo Bay during the interrogation, this is Camp X-Ray.
Yeah.
Right? And first off, you'd have to walk into the camp with a folder up to your head every day because various news stations were there, like filming the people walking in the camp.
Yeah.
Then, because the detainees were shackled hands and feet, and it was very hard for them to walk through this gravel to get from where they were from their being kept to the interrogation boxes. You know, the Marine commander there tried various ways of moving them, like on a golf cart, but it kept getting kind of its wheels bogged down, and then like on a dolly to help them basically. But everybody was reporting that they were being beaten so bad in these interrogations that they couldn't walk, and so the Marines were bringing them back on like
On a
dollies
gurney.
on a gurney and stuff, and it's like, well, that's not what's happening at all, but you know, a lot of times they can say things, you know, because nobody is going to speak out against it because what's going on is, you know,
Well, but also, why is the government not telling what's going
I
on?
have no
Everybody's-
idea.
What I've discovered over the many years of service with the United Nations and U.S. Army is everybody's got an agenda. Everybody's got something they're pushing. Everybody's got something they're selling. Everybody has a belief system that they want everybody else to believe. Okay, so everybody's trying to sell
Sure.
something. Now, the only thing I advise anybody that happens to be listening out there is apply a great deal of skepticism.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Caveat emptor. Buyer beware. Okay. Take a hard look at anything you decide to buy. Okay. Remember the guy at the 1936 Nuremberg rally, Hitler's rally. Okay, in Nuremberg. I think it was 1936. And it was quoted in Eric Hoffer's book, his 1951 classic True Believer, where he said, "We are now free from freedom." And what he meant was, is that Hitler and the National Socialist Party in Germany are going to make all our
Yeah,
decisions
they're
for
going
us.
to tell you what to do.
Recognize that there's a lot of people out there that are happy to have somebody else make their decisions for them, take responsibility for those decisions, and relieve them
Right.
If you're-
all that accountability. Now, from 1936 to 1946, the Nuremberg Trials. Okay, the Nuremberg Trials. What was the refrain? Over and over and over again, we heard, I was only following orders. I was only following orders. His orders were immoral. They were illegal. They were unethical. Okay, they were murderous. But they followed their orders. Did the Nuremberg Trials accept those? No, they did not. Everybody needs to remember 1936, 1946, cause, effect.
And they violated German law.
Yes.
Not just some international Geneva Convention, whatever. They
Yes.
violated their own laws.
Yes. But recognize also that as American Army soldiers, for example, we do not have to follow any of the military. You don't have to follow an order that is illegal or immoral. Okay? Illegal is relatively easy. How do you define immorality?
Right.
Okay? I think it's a lot tougher.
Right.
How many soldiers fall on their sword on something like that?
Not many.
Not too many. How many generals have stood up and said, "Mr. President, if you make this decision, I'm going to submit my resignation and protest"? How many generals have we seen do that? Okay, I am disappointed in our general officers. I'm disappointed in our flag officers over the last 20 years, who continued to sell a line, a narrative to the American people that the war in Afghanistan and prior, in Vietnam, and prior, in between Iraq, was winnable. That somehow we were going to be victorious.
Line of bullshit.
None of these things were true. None of these things were true.
Jerry has this question. If you have an option, which would you choose? Minusima, Unic, Unis. I don't even know what those missions
I do.
are.
I do.
Okay.
Okay. It doesn't matter. Okay, we're talking about UN missions. Okay, and you're not going to get that choice anyway. Okay, it's not up to you. If you're applying to the United Nations for a position, okay, and I recommend to you do, it's an eye-opening experience, but recognize that you're going to end up serving with people that don't share your same values. Okay, if you understand that going in, that means you can't necessarily, unlike being on a special forces team, I could trust every single one of my teammates to have my back. Okay? In the United Nations, you are alone. Understand that going in. You will be alone. And nobody has your back. If you understand that going in, go ahead and take a job in any one of those
This
peacekeeping
reminds
missions.
me of the Scott Ritter episode,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah. Scott Ritter.
I remember Scott
Yeah.
Ritter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote 3 articles about Scott years ago.
We had him on here.
when he was one of the weapons inspectors.
Yeah.
I remember Scott. Okay, I hope I answered your friend's question. But if you're interested in a job with the United Nations, take a job in the United Nations. It's a fascinating experience. It's going to expand your personal horizons in ways you can't anticipate.
Brendan says, congratulations on another insightful guest. Have a great day. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Jim G. Ralph Peters would be a great guest on the team house.
Yeah, Ralph would. Ralph would be a great guest on any show.
Let's see. I think that's it for user questions. If you guys get any more, get them in the next couple minutes because we're coming up on the 2-hour mark.
Yeah, and I got to go to the bathroom.
Absolutely, man.
Oh, if you want to go, we'll plug our show. If you want to take a quick one,
That would be kind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
We'll just
checking.
We'll
Thank you.
Hey guys,
Come back and we'll have some final Q&As.
thanks everybody for joining us tonight. And it's great. It's awesome to have you in studio.
You got it, man.
If you haven't already, please like this. Please
Subscribe to the channel.
Subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell icon so you get the notifications. And join our Patreon. Why don't you? Just hang out with us.
Take the plunge.
Only $1 a month will help us, keep building the studio, get our sound fixed even more. For those of you who, have rightly been complaining about the sound, Dee's bringing in a consultant tomorrow. We don't know what it is at this point.
I know what it is.
Magic.
I know what it is. These all fucked up.
Dee's all fucked up. Yeah. Dee, go back and watch our first 5 episodes. Our sound was perfect back then until you got.
I'm here. I'm
And for
sabotaging.
those of you who have been supporters, we just want to say that we really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, for real. And when you subscribe to the Patreon, you support the channel and you get access to the bonus segments. I'm gonna twist Bob's arm and try to get him to stay for a little bit longer.
And the bonus segments can be a lot of fun. Some of them are very interesting. Some are very personal. Some of them are a little bawdy. Some
off the wall?
Some are a little off the wall. Yeah. Flying monkeys.
Also, the Patreon for $5 a month, you get 2 extra shows per month.
Yeah,
For
we do
five,
we do bonus episodes.
Yeah,
for you guys.
if you want to see Jack and I sit around drinking and just talk about random bullshit.
And sometimes we have friends on.
Yeah. And also check out our Instagram. I think it's _team_house, right? Because it's happening.
We're
our
out there,
Instagram
folks.
is hot.
We're on all channels. We're on podcasts. You want to watch it on YouTube? It's all out there.
If there's anybody out there who does audio listening, rate and review us 5 stars on all the audio
on
platforms.
iTunes and wherever
Spotify,
else.
wherever else you get it.
Yeah,
if you get it on audio, rate and review it.
Yeah, if you guys do like us, please do support us. If you don't like us, you can keep that to yourself. We appreciate you being here.
And
anyway.
always remember,
But-
Team 20.
Yeah, Team 20 from MANSCAPED. But
Team 20.
it really helps us out a lot. If you give us a thumbs up and rate us and everything.
And I'll throw it out here now while Bob is using the laboratory. Next episode is going to be Jin Yu. He is the author of Yellow, Green Beret. It's a series of 3 books about his experiences in the military. Gene was a Special Forces soldier, as you can imagine. And, this guy just has stories for days and days. He currently, I believe, is the CEO of Black Panda, a security company. I think mostly in cybersecurity today, but he'll tell us all about it. Gene has, like I said, he has stories for days and days, and we're only going to be able to cover a fraction of them on next week's episode. But he's a fascinating guy, so I hope you'll tune in. He was a 1st Special Forces Group officer. I mean, it's gonna be a trip. He's a really funny guy. What's up, Bob?
Thank you. I'm 69 years old. I've got a prostate the size of a golf ball, okay? And you can't keep me sitting in here feeding me vodka and expect me to sit for 2 hours without visiting.
No, we don't expect you to sit. You can use the bathroom. It's okay.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
it, both of you.
Absolutely.
I feel so much better now.
So, Bob, your book is Surviving the United Nations. What has the reception been like? We talked to you about your experience in the United Nations back on episode 37. I really hope people will go back and watch it, especially if they like this interview. They're going to love the last one talking about Yemen, Iraq, Sierra Leone, some really incredible experiences. What's the reception been like to the book?
The reception has been extraordinary. The fact is, I've been writing and publishing for over 40 years, and I have always been able to find someone who hates what I'm saying. Always. Except with this book. This book has yet to get a bad review. I'm stunned. I'm
That's
absolutely
fantastic.
stunned.
Yeah.
I have yet to get a bad review.
Well, it is great. I mean, it is a great book.
Thank you.
I
have yet
think
to
it was a really important perspective, and a unique perspective, because you have the maturity to look at the United Nations and say, yeah, these guys are messed up. Like, this is a screwed up organization. But at the same time, it also provides some really important functions around the world. And if the United Nations and one of their primary sponsors, the United States, doesn't do that, then who is?
Yes. Absolutely. I believe that the United Nations is absolutely essential, but it's important for everybody to understand that the United Nations is not one organization. It's dozens of organizations under one umbrella. So there's the political United Nations, there's development United Nations, there's peacekeeping United Nations, and humanitarian United Nations. In terms of the humanitarian and peacekeeping sides of the United Nations House, we're talking about peacekeeping missions and UNICEF, UNHCR, the World Food Program. We're talking about organizations that are one of a kind in the world. Nobody else does what they do. Nobody else can do what they do. And we're talking about feeding millions of people every day around the globe that would die if they weren't served by something like the World Food Program. And back to the World Food Program again, their number one supporter financially is the United States. We do more for the WFP than anybody else. It's extraordinary. Now, I wanted to make another point too. Serving with the United Nations is special operations squared. And let me tell you why I say that. Because when we went through phase 1 training and phase 2 and phase 3, and we talked about the diplomacy and foreign internal defense and guerrilla warfare, these things are all real, and we face them all day, every day in the United Nations. And if you're not paying attention, start paying attention, because the United Nations deals with these issues every single day. Cross-cultural communications, MOI, methods of instruction, threat and risk analysis, okay? We do that in the United Nations in multiple countries around the world every single day. It is the single most challenging security environment in the world. So for Special Forces guys, in particular, that are already partially schooled in this environment, the switch to the United Nations, the big switch is that the missions remain outrageously difficult. Okay? You'll love that part. If you like difficult missions, you get difficult missions all day, every day. The difference is you can't always trust the guy that's behind you because their values might be different.
That's fucked
And you
up.
can't ever
Okay.
shoot the guy in front of you.
Okay? No. No, just understand it, okay? There are other cultures in other places that have other values. Now, we're talking about leadership in organizations like that. We're talking about cross-cultural leadership. You want to talk about challenge? Now, the guys that were working with Montagnards in Vietnam 50 years ago, okay, that was cross-cultural leadership. It wasn't just about paying their salaries every month. They made connections with these people, human connections, emotional connections, and that played out, didn't it?
Right.
Okay? We helped get Montagnards out of Vietnam and into the United States and their families. We tried to, you see that playing out anywhere else? You see that playing in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
We made commitments. We acted honorably, even if our politicians
Yeah.
have questionable loyalty and are questionably honorable. But remember that honor, in my estimation, is acting against self-interest, acting for someone else.
I was, this week looking at pictures that There were DoD published pictures, called propaganda, if you will, but Afghan refugees on military bases
Yeah.
around the United
Yeah.
States.
Yep.
Fort Bliss, bunch of them in New Jersey. Little kids saluting the American flag at revelry.
Yeah. All of that's a Band-Aid over a massive, gaping wound that we have created. And we need to face up to that.
Yeah.
We as a people, we as a society, we need to face up to that. We did that. Our mistakes did that. Our president made a decision, okay, that led to all these deaths, all these dismemberments, okay, all this suffering, and over hundreds of thousands dead in Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria.
Bob, what strikes me? It's tough to talk about, but what strikes me is that there is a need among societies to forget about war, to forget about these conflicts, to forget about these veterans. And a lot of veterans, they talk about how our society doesn't seem grateful to them,
Yes.
appreciative to them for what
Yes.
they've done, which is true. But at the same time, war is so psychologically traumatic. It's so difficult to deal with. It's so difficult to cope with, that there is this like very fundamental need for the society, for the culture, to forget about the war, to put it behind them, like in Vietnam, like in now Afghanistan, to memory hole it.
I tell you what, I'm going to fundamentally disagree. You're talking about our recent experience. If you look at World War II, okay, the individuals who fought in World War II, traumatized, we're talking about significant trauma, all of
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
However, they won.
Yeah.
When they returned home, they won.
They felt good about it.
Those who survived felt good about it. And understand this too, their societies felt good about it.
And they love them for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, that hasn't happened since World War II. This is what Ralph Peters was talking about with me, okay? Don't get into a war unless you're going to fight to win,
Right.
okay? What, we fought to lose?
Right. Well, you have to know what winning means in order to fight to win.
And what I said previously applies. First, know what your objective is. Then you develop a strategy in order to meet that objective. That's all about limited wars. Okay? Fine. We know how to fight limited wars. What's interesting, though, is that doesn't seem to translate from the White House to the
But
military.
even in World War II, wasn't a significant amount of it sort of whitewashed, in the sense that like these guys experienced some really horrendous. Like, yeah, okay, they weren't at war they didn't deploy 20 times like today's generation did, but within the scope of a year or two, they saw some really messed up stuff.
Okay. Threat analysis. What was the threat to the United States as a consequence of World War II? Okay? We're talking about what was viewed at that time as an existential threat to the nation. So we were essentially fighting for our lives. We're fighting for our lives, damn it. Now, when you fight for your lives, what do? You do whatever it takes. You do whatever it takes. We firebombed Dresden and killed over 100,000 men, women, and children.
We nuked Hiroshima.
Okay,
and
we
Nagasaki.
nuked, yeah. Okay, I was going to get to that. Okay, over 4 million dead
Yeah.
or missing in Germany. Okay, now that wasn't a consequence of all us. That was also in large measure, the Russians, the Russian front. Okay, and the British and the French. But the result was the same: 4 million dead. My point is that what rose from the ashes as a consequence of what MacArthur did in Japan, and what General Clay did, and what the Marshall Plan, after World War II, we ended up, because of our humanitarianism, because of our economic largesse, we helped create two of the most dynamic democracies on the face of the globe. Modern day Japan, modern day Germany.
And then
But
South
we had to
Korea.
do a lot of killing to do it. Now, was Afghanistan ever in that category? No. So what we were doing in Afghanistan was going to be a limited war from the get-go. Okay. Unfortunately, we had a commander-in-chief that didn't understand what he was doing. It was almost childlike in some ways. Chose objectives that were grossly unrealistic, infeasible, could never be accomplished, not by the military arm of the United States, and would have taken multiple generations in order to achieve, which is something no White House could ever actually conceive.
Right.
But what do presidents do? Presidents are in office for 4, maybe 8 years. We have a limited view. I remember in, 1972, President Nixon goes to China. They're talking about the issue of Taiwan. And the Chinese are saying, okay, we'll sort out Taiwan over the next 100 years. Okay, the Americans are stunned by that response. Okay, the Shanghai Communique, the Americans are stunned by that response. We'll sort it out over the next 100 years. Okay, I need to go back to Washington and give them an answer now.
Right. Right.
We'll get that sorted out right away.
Okay, talk about strategy. Okay, 100 years strategy, 100 years national strategy. We don't have strategies in America. We have administrations.
Yeah,
okay?
Right.
Good administration. And the other thing I'll point out about our system of government is we are some of the world's most adroit muddlers. We muddle through. We muddle through here. We muddle through there. Okay, Churchill.
Well, it's like being protected by the Atlantic and the Pacific. It's like someone described it to me as being like the strategic cheat code, right? It gives us this insulation. Like we can do these insane things that no other country has these margins for error.
What I would say about the Americans, and I'm talking about myself in the third person, and I recognize, I know I'm talking about myself in the third person, okay? The Americans are magnificent. The Americans are magnificent.
And our soldiers will fight. Like they don't give a shit.
Yes.
Really, they will.
No,
They'll fight.
We are a magnificent people, and outrageously naive simultaneously.
Yeah, yeah.
And that naivete is what gets us into trouble time after time after time. I believe it was Lenin that said the road to hell is paved with good intentions, okay? The Americans always have the best of intentions,
Right.
okay? And damn it, we're always on the side of the good guys. And we always want to destroy evil. But the fact is, evil's been around for a very long time.
Right.
I know George W. Bush wanted to go out and defeat evil, but I'm sorry,
Well, that's-
okay?
yeah.
Evil exists within us, okay? As well as good exists within us. So we're battling with ourselves, okay? If you intend to fight a war, to defeat evil, figure on fighting for centuries, because we're never going to get there. That's the same problem with the American global war on terror, okay? Terrorism is not the right word. Terrorism is a tactic. What we're really talking about is extremism, and extremism has existed in humankind since humankind existed. Since the Neanderthals, there's always been groups within tribal organizations which could not conform with the norms, whatever the norms were. These are on the extremes. There's always been extremists. So the American global war on terror is a war that can be fought but never won. So we've entered a conflict which can be fought but never won, and will commit U.S. military forces to eternal war around the globe, and because we are what we are, with the greatest nation on earth, the most powerful nation on earth, okay, all the extremists will see us as the enemy. You remember the scene in Jeremiah Johnson? Remember that scene?
Which
Okay.
one?
Will Gear says that the one Indian tribe, they know if they're great on how great their enemies
Right,
be.
right.
Okay? That's very much the case with
Right.
ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Okay? They're looking for, extremists are always looking for the enemy. Okay? We're it. We're Big Daddy Rabbit. Okay? They're going to come after us.
Right.
They're going to come after us.
Well, I mean, it's part of it. I mean, it's the whole branding thing because before we had the global war on terror, we had the war on drugs. We have the wars on obesity.
Right,
You know,
right.
we have the war. I mean, everything.
Americans need branding.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's branding.
And what does war mean to Americans? Okay?
Good
And how
question.
successful has the American war on drugs been?
Well,
Not very.
No, it was.
Not at all.
Yeah, it was waste. I mean,
Not at all.
And it was a waste.
We spent a lot of money on it.
I think, obviously not this global war on terror. I feel as though a lot of our efforts against terrorism have been effective, but they've been effective when they have been limited in nature.
I agree,
The
but at what
tactical
cost?
side,
yeah.
Okay? So the analogy is using a hammer to kill a mosquito, okay? When you can kill a mosquito with a flick of your finger.
Right.
Okay? We're using hammers to kill mosquitoes. And I don't understand how we became such, and I'm sorry for using the word, but the word just works. When did we become such pussies?
Where
Okay.
a B-2
The-
is used to
the
blow up
world's a
T-55
dangerous
tank
place.
in Afghanistan.
Americans go out in the world. We go places. We do things. Okay, and in some cases we run into people that don't like us and they'll kill us. Okay, if you're worried about that, don't go there.
Right.
Okay, stay in Oklahoma.
Right.
Okay, stay in Arkansas. Stay in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm enormously disturbed by the U.S. State Department. Okay, and I have really, really good
You're
friends.
saying they're a
over
bunch
there.
of weeping vaginas.
No, not at all, not at all. But yes. Okay. No. What I'm saying is, what I'm saying is, American embassies around the world have been turned into bastions. They've been turned into fortresses. It used to be that American embassies were places where people could go to get information. And American diplomats would be found all over the country, going places, doing things, talking with people, collecting information, overt intelligence collection, and they did it everywhere. Now, they're in their embassies. And they rarely step outside their embassies. Okay, if they're in debt, Yemen is the perfect example. The regional security officer in Yemen was actually jealous of me because I could go anywhere in Yemen. I could get in my truck, grab my assistant, okay, and if I wanted to drive out to Hadramaut, I went. Okay, now the Hadramaut is Indian country, all right, that's places where people get hurt. But if I wanted to go out there, I'd get my assistant, he'd talk with one of the local sheikhs, he'd give me local protection, and I'd go.
This is the thing about being an American is that, yeah, we're hopelessly naive about what's going on around the world, but at the same time, you are not tied into the local culture and the local ancestral animosities, and it allows you to travel around and talk to people that other people just simply can't talk to.
Yes. And what's interesting, Yemen was the perfect example. I could go out to a tribal area, and they were fascinated to meet me. Many of them had never met an American before. They'd heard about them, okay? They'd heard about Americans. They saw them on TV, stuff like that. Never met an American, okay? Go out to the Hadramaut, okay? Sit down with a tribal chief. They'd kill a goat, okay? They'd make a great big meal out of it. Everybody'd come in, and we'd all sit around, and I'd work through the interpreter, and these guys would ask me questions, okay? Some of the tribal sheikhs would offer me their daughters. No, I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. They'd let me look under the veil and check her out.
How'd that go down?
Not well with my wife.
Yeah.
Yep.
She put the kibosh on that?
Yep. No, actually, I did. I had explained to the.
You could,
I'd
if you
explained
had
to the sheikh.
converted, you could have had more than one.
I'd explained to the sheikh,
You could
okay.
have more than one.
No. That my woman was an Egyptian. Okay. Okay. The Yemenis respected the Egyptians. Okay. And that my wife wouldn't tolerate a second wife or
I got it.
a third wife,
I
or
got
a
it.
fourth wife, and my wife was going to only have one wife, and halas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Halas.
Which is Arabic
Yeah.
for halas.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, man. I mean, one is enough.
Yeah.
That's a biased opinion coming from one American guy. Just saying one is enough.
I guess my point would be to the Special Forces community that might be listening to some of this conversations about the United Nations. I am unfamiliar with a job anywhere in the world that more needs Special Forces qualities and skill sets. The skill sets that I developed in Special Forces led me to become a chief security officer on a peacekeeping mission in West Africa. I was successful in that assignment in large measure based on my Special Forces training. The unsuccessful part of it had to do with my honesty and integrity. Okay, because if you're going to be honest and if you're going to hold your integrity. So, did I tell you that story?
Which one?
No. A woman came into my office and she told me that the head of the mission, the West African former ambassador, was deeply engaged in the blood diamond trade.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I remember this in your book.
Yeah, it's in the book. And I said, and she wanted me to look into it. I'm the chief security officer. And I'm going like, okay, well, thank you very much. And she saunters off. And I turned to her going, what the hell am I going to do with this? I don't have an investigative mandate. And this is the guy I work for.
Right.
Okay? And if he's nasty, if he's dirty, if he's corrupt, if he's stealing blood diamonds, holy shit, here's a head of he's a UN former West African ambassador. Oh my God. So I sent a note to New York through a non-UN computer using my personal email address to a trusted agent I know at UN headquarters. 24 hours later, I get the answer. The answer is 2 words. Tell nobody. That's the answer. That's the answer.
Holy
Tell
shit.
nobody, okay? Well, I've just told UN headquarters that the head of a peacekeeping mission in West Africa is deeply involved in the blood diamond trade. And the answer I get from New York is, tell nobody.
What does that tell you? Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Yeah.
What does
Well,
that
when
tell
you have what China and whoever else
The
is
Lebanese.
on the Human Rights Council telling Americans that we need to respect human rights, like
Well,
there might
yeah.
be issues. There might
Yes,
be issues.
all the above. Yes,
All right,
of course.
guys. I want to wrap up this episode and roll into the bonus segment with Bob. I want to hear the crazy stories Bob has. That's what I want to hear on the bonus segment.
I'd have to get a lot more drunk for that.
Pour yourself another drink there, Bob. Pour
Hey.
yourself another drink.
Pay $1 and you get to hear this.
I didn't know there was a bonus round.
There is a bonus
There
round.
is a bonus round.
There's always a bonus
Okay.
round.
It's not going to be live. It'll be up probably around Wednesday.
Pour him a double there, Dave. Pour him a double. So, guys, we'll see you next week. We're going to be here with Jin Yu, the author of Yellow Green Beret. There's like 3 of these books. They're on Amazon. If you want to do some pre-reading, they're up there. You go download them and read them before next Friday's episode. And in the meantime, there's also Bob's book, Surviving the United Nations. It's up there on Amazon now if you want to order the paperback, or it's on Kindle, right?
Yeah, it's on Kindle.
There's an ebook out there.
Yeah, there's an ebook.
I highly recommend it. It's going to give you a perspective that you've never heard before.
Actually, I recommend the ebook version because I have an academic publisher. So the hard version and even the soft cover is kind of expensive. Okay, go with the Kindle if you can. It's cheaper.
We have Andrew Dunbar. Thank you. Fun fact: George McGovern was DWB's ambassador to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, that George McGovern.
Yes, he was.
Jerry J. I was in SEAL Team 6, so I did my part. Thank you for your hair mousse, Jerry.
So, guys, thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next Friday. Thank you, everyone. And until next time, peace.